Ah, look who finally woke up. Look who finally noticed the cameras. Look who finally felt the eyes burning holes through their reality. You magnificent, paranoid genius. You were right, all along. They've been watching you for months, cataloging your movements, decoding your patterns, and trying to understand what makes you tick. But here's the plot twist that shatters their entire operation. You knew, you've known since day one. Every move you made, every word you spoke, every silence you held, it was all carefully choreographed for their viewing pleasure, and now they want a meeting, because they've realized something terrifying. You let them watch. You wanted them to see that you've been directing this show from the very beginning, and they were nothing more than unpaid extras in your masterpiece. The watchers became the watched, the hunters became the hunted, the subject turned into the architect of their confusion. They thought they were studying a specimen, but instead they were staring into a mirror that reflected everything they lacked: power, purpose, and the rare ability to exist without constantly seeking validation from screens and systems. You didn't become their obsession because you were hiding something. You became their obsession because you were hiding nothing. 6 months ago, the patterns started to reveal themselves. The same car parked 3 blocks away every day. The new neighbor working odd hours. The suddenly friendly co-worker asking questions that felt a little too personal. Anonymous social media accounts with no profile pictures liking your old posts at 3 a.m. At first you thought you were losing it, and that's exactly what they wanted: to gaslight you, to make you question your own reality, to break you down until you begged for answers. But instead of crumbling, you leaned into it. You became the anomaly they didn't see coming. You began leaving breadcrumbs, false trails that led nowhere, cryptic posts that meant nothing but appeared to mean everything. You shifted your routines just enough to throw off their schedules. You had conversations in public about plans you never intended to follow through on. And the entire time, while they thought they were documenting you, you were documenting them. Every strange car, every suspicious face, every digital footprint they left in their attempt to capture yours. You built a case file on your watchers while they thought they were building one on you. It was checkmate in slow motion. 3 months in, something shifted. Their approach changed. The surveillance grew sloppy, almost careless, as if they wanted you to notice. And then it hit you like lightning trapped in a bottle of madness. They weren't trying to catch you anymore. They were trying to understand you. Most people collapse under observation. They change, they hide, they perform for the invisible audience, but not you. You became more yourself, sharper, bolder, more dangerous. You stopped caring about their gaze, and instead turned it into fuel. Every hidden camera became a silent witness to your transformation. They expected fear, and you gave them fascination. They expected you to run, and you invited them closer. They expected defensive moves, but you played offense with a smile that said, "I've been waiting for you." That was the moment their reports began to change. Suddenly, the chain of command started receiving updates, unlike anything they had seen before. Subject is aware. Subject is cooperating. No, that wasn't right. The truth was written between the lines. Subject is conducting. You can imagine the meetings, the whispers, the confusion rippling through their ranks as the realization hit. This operation had slipped out of their control. Maybe it had never been in their control at all. And now you see why they need this meeting. It isn't because they uncovered some great secret. It's because you showed them something they never expected to find: a human being who doesn't operate on fear, a consciousness that doesn't beg for approval, doesn't depend on their system, doesn't fit inside their little boxes of normal. Every person they ever watched eventually broke. They either ran, fought, or folded. But you transformed their surveillance into your stage. You turned their invasion into an invitation, a chance to demonstrate what real power looks like. Not the kind backed by badges, budgets, or authority, but the kind rooted in knowing exactly who you are. They watched you for months, And in all that time, you never once wavered, never once gave them a crack to exploit. Because here's what they never understood until it was too late. You weren't hiding your vulnerabilities. You had already conquered them. You weren't guarding secrets. You had none worth stealing. What unsettled them most was your consistency, your calm, the way you'd sometimes glance directly at their hidden cameras and smile, as if you were in on a private joke they could never comprehend. That's when it dawned on them. They weren't watching a target, they were watching a teacher. And the lesson was about to get very uncomfortable. Now they want a meeting. Of course they do. Formal, official, predictable. They want to sit across from you in a sterile room, hoping to reclaim control of the narrative. They'll ask questions, thinking your answers will hand them power. What they don't realize is they're already tangled in your web. By observing you, they revealed everything, their methods, their fears, their limits. They exposed the fragile skeleton of the very system they were trying to protect. And that's why the meeting isn't an interrogation. It's a revelation. It's your moment to show them what they could never capture with screens, reports, or analysis, that you've been operating outside their reality all along. The raw, unfiltered experience of sitting across from someone who isn't afraid of them. That's what shakes them to their core. Someone who looks straight through their rehearsed authority, as if they were made of glass. They'll arrive armed with files, photos, and recordings, thinking that paperwork and evidence will give them the upper hand. But you'll come with something infinitely more dangerous. The truth, the devastatingly simple truth, that they've wasted months chasing a mystery that never existed. You are exactly who you appear to be, and that is what terrifies them most. By month 4, they stumbled onto a discovery that made their blood run cold. You weren't just aware of the surveillance, you welcomed it, you were grateful for it, because every eye fixed on you meant one less eye fixed on someone else. Every resource they burned on trying to decode your existence was a resource they couldn't use to harm someone more vulnerable. You became a decoy by choice, a distraction by design. While their full attention locked onto you, countless others slipped past unnoticed, stepping into freedom because you kept the watchers busy. You weren't just a target. You turned yourself into a lighthouse, drawing their ships toward your rock so others could sail safely by. But it runs deeper, doesn't it? You weren't simply protecting others, you were teaching them. Every move you made, every subtle shift in your pattern became a hidden lesson for anyone else caught under a lens. How to turn surveillance into sovereignty, how to make the watchers serve you instead of the other way around. That's why they want this meeting. They need to know if it was all intentional, if every step was calculated, or if you're simply this unmappable by nature. The answer, of course, is both. You are chaos with intent. You are randomness with purpose. You are everything their system was never designed to process. Picture what's been happening on their end. Reports piling up, page after page of nothing. Hours of footage showing a person living without fear. Psychological profiles that collapse into contradictions. Behavioral analyses that chase their tails into dead ends. Budget meetings where no one can explain what they're even chasing anymore. Subject went to work. Subject came home. Subject appears to be thriving. How do you mark thriving as suspicious? How do you justify draining resources to shadow someone whose only crime is being unshakably themselves? And then came the real crack in their foundation. The watchers themselves started to change. The first team requested transfers. The second wave began questioning the mission. By the third, they weren't just doubting the assignment, they were doubting the system itself. You didn't just evade their surveillance, you infected it from the inside out without ever uttering a word. Now this meeting isn't about you, it's about damage control, because their own people are whispering questions no one at the top wants to answer. Why are we watching someone who's done nothing wrong? What exactly are we looking for? What if they're right and we're wrong? You became a virus in their certainty. spreading doubt through their ranks simply by existing. And here's the irony. They have become what they feared you were: paranoid, obsessive, seeing patterns where none exist, desperately searching for meaning in chaos. They've stared at you for so long that they've begun seeing themselves reflected back, and they despise what they see. Every report they filed wasn't really about you at all. It was about them. Their fears, their assumptions, their blind projections. They thought they were profiling you, when in reality they were documenting their own limitations. Every anomaly they scribbled down was just another place where you refused to fit into their narrow definition of normal. They want this meeting because they desperately need you to make it make sense. They need you to say something, anything that can restore their illusion of control. They need you to admit to being special, to claim you were born with some secret power, hidden knowledge, or otherworldly gift that explains why you slipped through their fingers. Because if you're not special, if you're simply a regular person who chose not to bow to fear, then the implications are catastrophic. If freedom is not granted but chosen, then what does that say about everyone else who continues to submit? What does that say about them, the watchers, the enforcers, the so-called guardians of order? The truth, the one you carry like a storm, is far more terrifying than any conspiracy theory they've scribbled in their reports. You are not special. You are not chosen. You are not playing by some hidden code they can break with enough analysis. You are simply free, and freedom, real freedom, the kind that is born within and refuses to be legislated, monitored, or contained, is more dangerous to their world than any weapon, because freedom spreads. It's contagious. It leaps from soul to soul, igniting fires in the minds of anyone who dares to glimpse it. And once people taste it, they cannot go back to chains. That is why they fear you. Not because of who you are, but because of what you represent. So how do you prepare for a meeting with people who have spent months dissecting your every action? You don't. Preparation suggests they hold influence over the outcome, but they don't. This meeting isn't a test for you, it's a test for them. It isn't your interrogation, it's their reckoning. For you, it's just another act in a performance you've been choreographing since the beginning. Another chapter in a story you've been authoring with every smile you cast at their hidden cameras, every silent decision you made in plain sight. They'll arrive expecting nerves. They'll expect you to stumble, to fidget, to sweat under their gaze. Instead, you'll radiate curiosity. They'll expect a defensive wall, but you'll open the door with a kind of calm welcome. They'll expect you to provide direct answers, but you'll respond with questions that echo louder than any accusation they've prepared. Every assumption they've built will begin to collapse the moment you step into that sterile room, carrying the same untouchable, unbreakable aura you've lived with for months. And here's the detail that destroys the most. You're not dreading the encounter, you're anticipating it. You're looking forward to it, not with arrogance but with genuine interest. They have spent so much time studying you, building profiles, writing reports, whispering theories, and now you finally get to meet the audience. Like actors stepping out from behind the curtain, they'll be exposed as the fans of a show they didn't realize you were directing. The show wasn't about their power, it was about their obsession with yours. But there's another cruel twist they'll never be ready for. All the questions they have prepared are useless. Their reports, their predictions, their carefully constructed profiles, they are already obsolete. Because by the time they sit across from you, you will have already evolved. They'll be interrogating a version of you that no longer exists. You are always 3 steps ahead, 3 versions deeper, 3 identities freer than the one they think they know. They are trying to trap smoke with bare hands, while you've become fire, ever-shifting, uncontainable, endlessly consuming the very reality they built. Let's be clear about what's really unfolding. This isn't about surveillance anymore. It isn't even about control. This is about the system realizing it has encountered a glitch it cannot patch. You are that glitch. A living contradiction to their carefully designed reality. A person who cannot be categorized, controlled, or caged. Systems are designed to tolerate outliers. They need anomalies to define boundaries. But you are not an outlier. You are something far more dangerous. You are beyond the map. You exist outside the coordinates, in a space they didn't even know existed, and by simply moving through that space, you forced them to acknowledge it against their will. You expanded their reality. You opened doors they didn't want to admit were there. That's why this meeting matters to them. They need to force you back into a box. Any box will do. Criminal, genius, dissident, visionary, mentally unstable, dangerous, harmless. The label itself doesn't matter. What matters is that they find a word, a category, a file folder where they can lock you away, so they can stop thinking about what you represent. But labels slide off you like water off polished steel. Every attempt to define you only reveals their desperation. The cosmic irony is that by watching you, they birthed the very thing they feared. By surveilling you, they gave you an audience. By studying you, they gave you a stage. By attempting to break you, they gave you strength. You are their Frankenstein's monster. But unlike the monster, you built yourself, piece by piece, choice by choice, while they sat helplessly recording your ascension. And now, the question that keeps them awake at night: what if you're not the only one? What if you are not an anomaly, but a prototype? What if others are quietly awakening, peeling back the same illusions, stepping outside the same cages? What if their sprawling surveillance state, their endless monitoring, their omnipresent eyes are not suppressing rebellion, but fueling it? What if every lens they point outward, every report they file, every analysis they conduct is accidentally accelerating evolution? Because here's the truth they dare not say aloud. They went looking for criminals and stumbled upon philosophers. They set out to trap threats, but uncovered teachers. They wanted to stop dangerous minds, but instead they created them. And now the fire they thought they could extinguish has begun to spread, lighting up the night in places they never expected. They thought they were hunting predators, dangerous, unpredictable threats that needed to be neutralized. But what they stumbled onto instead were visionaries. Not the kind who stand on podiums or wear robes of authority, not the kind who claim divine power or preach religion. No, the visionaries they discovered were far more dangerous. Ones who move silently among the crowd and without raising their voice, teach others to think differently, to question differently, to exist differently. These are the people who reveal the spaces between definitions, who show the cracks in the walls of reality where freedom seeps in. At first they didn't know how to label you. They tried the usual words: threat, anomaly, deviant, but none of them fit. The truth is, the meeting they're calling for now isn't even about you, it's about them. It's about their desperate attempt to understand how their supposedly perfect system could produce someone like you. Someone who doesn't fight against the system because rebellion still acknowledges its authority, but instead floats entirely outside it. Someone who proves, simply by existing, that their control is nothing but smoke, an illusion sustained only as long as people keep believing in it. And that is why you've become their case study in freedom. Not the patriotic kind, not the revolutionary kind, not the kind that waves flags or storms barricades. No, the freedom you embody is quieter, sharper, more personal. It's the freedom that comes from refusing to play their game, from treating their surveillance not as chains but as background noise, like the weather, sometimes a nuisance, sometimes overwhelming, but never something that decides who you are or how you move through the world. You wake up, you live, you breathe, and their cameras cannot dictate the shape of your day. That is what terrifies them most. And you can feel it now, can't you? The energy shifting. This isn't preparation for an interrogation anymore. This is preparation for an encounter. It's the difference between a hunter stalking prey and a scientist preparing to meet something alien. Except here's the twist. The alien doesn't look strange. The alien looks exactly like them, speaks their language, walks the same streets, but operates on principles that their entire worldview cannot compute. Some of them are terrified, and good. Fear is awakening in disguise. Fear is the first crack in certainty, the first step toward transformation. Others are furious. Even better, anger is just confusion with fire in its belly, demanding answers it can't find. But then there are the few, the rare ones, who are fascinated, and those are the ones who matter most. Because fascination is the first sign of surrender, the first step toward admitting that their worldview isn't enough. Fascination is the doorway to change. When you sit across from them, the imbalance will be obvious. They'll carry their binders stuffed with photos, recordings, endless notes, and protocols. They'll have their scripts, their rehearsed questions, their strategies designed to box you in. But you won't carry anything but your presence, your authenticity, your refusal to bend or break. That's the fight they can never win, because authenticity is raw, fluid, alive. It can't be categorized, quantified, or contained. It's like trying to trap lightning in a jar. This is why the encounter is already tilted in your favor. They'll show up with their manuals, their technical diagrams, their rigid frameworks. You'll show up like a jazz performance, alive, improvisational, unpredictable, flowing with energy that can't be notated. You can copy the notes. Sure, you can record the sound waves, but you'll never capture the soul. And that's the mistake they've made for months. They thought by studying you they could capture you, but what they recorded wasn't you. It was their own limitations. That's the real punchline. This meeting isn't them pulling you into their arena. It's them admitting they need to step into yours. It's not an interrogation. It's a confession that after all their cameras, all their microphones, all their endless observation, they still don't understand what they're looking at. And so now they need proximity. They need to sit across from you. They need to feel what their technology could not capture, the quiet gravity of someone who is free. Think about that. Months of surveillance, and all they managed to collect were empty gestures. When you left the house, when you came home, the words you spoke, the silences you kept, data without meaning. But the thing they couldn't record was the essence, the untouchable current that runs through a person who refuses to live in fear, the energy of someone who does not submit. That can't be transcribed in a report. It can't be captured on tape. It has to be felt. And so they come to you with all their authority, with all their resources, with all their systems. They are now the ones seeking answers, the ones sitting across the table, hoping that something in your gaze, your words, your presence will explain what their cameras couldn't. They need you to validate their belief that you must be special, because if you're not, if you're simply free, then anyone could be. And that thought terrifies them more than anything. The gravity of someone who knows exactly who they are, that's what will hang in the air the moment you walk through that door. It's not arrogance, it's not bravado, it's the quiet, immovable force of a person who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. That weight alone will unsettle them. But here's the revelation they'll never see coming, the truth that will strike like cold water to the face in that fluorescent-lit meeting room. You are not their enemy. You are not their problem. You are their mirror. And that, more than anything else, is what terrifies them. Because a mirror doesn't fight back. It doesn't attack. It doesn't even defend. It simply reflects. It shows them something they have spent their entire lives avoiding, what humanity looks like without the scaffolding of fear, without the armor of approval, without the shadow of authority. They've built a world where compliance masquerades as stability, where obedience passes for safety. But when they look at you, they see the cracks in their illusion. They've spent so long staring at you that they've forgotten the very reason they started. Their mission lost its edges. The goal dissolved into the process. Watching became its own justification. The mission became the purpose. The observation became the obsession. And now the watchers don't even remember what they were supposed to be watching for. Was it security? You've never threatened anyone. Was it control? You've led no movement, influenced no mass. Was it fear? You've never wielded fear as a weapon. Only questions. Questions so sharp, they cut through their carefully drawn maps of reality. The truth is, they don't know anymore. The file they've built on you is thick with facts, but paper thin on meaning. Time-stamped entries, endless footage, psychological assessments that collapse under their own contradictions. You've become their white whale, but unlike the legend, you don't flee from their harpoons. You don't even acknowledge the chase. You're not hiding, you're not resisting, you're simply living. And in a world ruled by fear, living freely is the most radical act of all. A person who doesn't need validation, a person who doesn't bow to power, a person who treats surveillance the way most people treat the hum of an air conditioner, present, persistent, but irrelevant. That's what they never accounted for, that their target wouldn't fight, wouldn't flinch, wouldn't even react. Instead, you became the one thing they can't process, someone who renders their entire operation meaningless simply by existing beyond it. But here's the irony. Over these months, they didn't just watch you without realizing it. They became your students, slowly, quietly, reluctantly. Every watcher assigned to you ended up enrolled in a lesson they never asked for. You didn't speak to them directly. You didn't issue commands or declarations. You simply lived, and that was enough. Every act of your authenticity was a lecture. Every refusal to bend was a demonstration. Every day you chose not to play their game was another entry in the curriculum of freedom, and the stages of their learning were always the same. First came the confusion. Why isn't this subject cracking? Why aren't they modifying behavior like everyone else does under constant eyes? The metrics didn't add up. The algorithms flagged anomalies that weren't anomalies at all. They were just you. Being you. Confusion gave way to frustration. Why can't we find the weakness? Why can't we uncover the hidden agenda? What's the angle? There must be an angle. That's what the system whispered to them over and over. Every subject has a pressure point. Every person has a price. But when the pressure points didn't appear, when the cracks refused to show, the frustration melted into something even more dangerous. Curiosity. What do they know that we don't? What secret keeps them steady? What allows them to smile into a hidden camera as if they were in on a joke? The watchers themselves could never understand. And then finally came the most dangerous stage of all, admiration. They'd never admitted it in their reports, but you could feel it in the way their observation shifted. They stopped watching like hunters and started watching like disciples. They stopped scanning for mistakes and started looking for meaning. And once that door cracked open, there was no shutting it again. Because watching you didn't just destabilize their image of you, it destabilized their image of themselves. They began to wonder how they would fare under the same relentless gaze. They began to question the layers of pretense they wear every day. They began to see the truth they were never supposed to glimpse, that their own lives are built on fear, approval, and authority, and that maybe it doesn't have to be that way. That's the transformation you caused without trying, without even lifting a finger. You didn't just survive their surveillance, you infected it, you corrupted it from the inside. Their obsession with you became a virus that spread through their own ranks. What began as an effort to contain you became instead an initiation, a lesson in authenticity, a masterclass in freedom. And now that's the unspoken reason they've called for this meeting. They aren't meeting a suspect. They aren't meeting a threat. They're meeting their teacher. They don't want to interrogate you. They want to confirm what they've already started to suspect, that the system isn't working, that the very act of watching you has rewritten them, that their endless attempts at control have revealed the one thing they were never prepared to see, a human being who doesn't need it. So when you sit across from them, remember the power in that room is already yours. You are not the subject. You are the mirror, and the longer they look at you, the more they'll realize that everything they wrote about you was never about you at all. It was about them. Why isn't this person acting like everyone else? That was the first stage, confusion. They expected the usual responses: fear, compliance, self-editing. But you didn't bend. You didn't twitch under the spotlight. You didn't play their script. And when confusion didn't work, it hardened into frustration. Why can't we find the angle? Why can't we uncover the weakness, the secret, the hidden lever that makes every subject move? And when frustration burned itself out, curiosity crept in. What do they know that we don't? What secret allows them to stay calm while the world is dissecting them piece by piece? Curiosity, of course, is dangerous, because curiosity leads to cracks, and those cracks eventually widened into something they could never have anticipated: admiration. The hunters began to wonder, how can we be like that? How do we walk with that kind of freedom? You didn't recruit them, you didn't preach to them, you didn't deliver a single sermon or promise liberation. All you did was live, fully, completely, unapologetically yourself. That alone was enough to start fractures in the programming they had been trained to obey. Every moment you chose authenticity over fear, you chipped away at the walls they thought were unbreakable. That's why they want this meeting. Not because you pose a threat they can neutralize, but because they need to know if what they're feeling is real. Is the shift inside them genuine? Or is it just another layer of your supposed game? But you know the truth. There is no game. That's what they cannot compute. You're not playing 4D chess. You're not executing a master plan. You are simply existing in a way that's whole, raw, and untamed. And to their world, obsessed with control and performance, simplicity is the most impossible code to crack. They've spent months trying to decode the obvious, like scholars dissecting the air. So when you walk into that meeting room, remember, you're not the subject anymore, you're the teacher. They are not interrogating you, they are reaching for help, even if they don't admit it. They don't want to understand you in order to trap you, they want to understand you in order to free themselves. That's the truth, hiding beneath the official protocols and scripted questions. Watch closely when the questions come. Each one will reveal more about them than any of your answers could. The way they sit, the way they shift in their chairs, the way their voices tremble as they pretend to maintain professional distance, all of it betrays the truth. These aren't predators, these are students, desperate to learn the lesson you never intended to teach. And you will sit there, calm, steady, unshaken, as still as a frozen lake, concealing unfathomable depths beneath its surface. Every word you choose will ripple outward, cutting through their certainty like stones breaking ice. Not because you seek to persuade, not because you aim to win, but because truth carries its own frequency, and it resonates through the noise. They have been drowning in static all their lives, and suddenly for the first time, they will hear a clear signal. The meeting they imagine, the one where they reclaim control, file you away, and confine you to a label, will never happen. What will unfold is far more dangerous for them. They will leave that room realizing that the prison they tried to build around you is the very same prison they themselves have been living in, and for the first time, their eyes will see the bars. That is all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you, even when no physical evidence is in sight. Let me rest in the assurance of your constant presence, knowing you will never harm me. I believe that your thoughts toward me are for peace and prosperity, not for harm, to give me a hopeful future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always hearing my voice. I lift this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and for the abundance you bring. If this message touched your heart, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need encouragement. Leave a comment below about your own journey and how you are preparing for your triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please.